qualifying sellers. That's step 2. And this step right here is so critical to this entire program, because it's very easy for someone to drive past a home that has a for sale by owner sign, write down the phone number, and go email it to some investor. Anyone can do that. Anyone can email the address of a vacant property. The real key is to qualify and talk to the owner of the property and get specific information from them. And that then becomes the potential for a good quality lead that can be sold. And as we talked about in a previous video, this idea of a funnel, where basically you have all these different potentials coming into the funnel, and then you put them through where we are here, this qualification stage, and then from there out pops a few decent leads. Does that make sense? There's the illustration. So I want to start this conversation of qualifying sellers with something that's incredibly important, and that is your posture. Okay? Your position in talking to these people. This is a wonderful part of how this has been designed, because you don't have to know the answers to any of their questions. None. They could ask you how much you can pay for the house, how long you've been in business, what's your middle name. Any of those questions, it doesn't matter, because you know what your posture is? You're an info gatherer. Info gatherer. It's a wonderful position to be in, because it eliminates the responsibility of you having to know all this stuff about real estate and knowing how to help that person and all those other things in between. Instead, you're an info gatherer for other investors. So when the person says to you, how much are you going to buy my home for? You can answer, I don't know. And it's not just you dodging the question, you legitimately don't know. You're gathering information. What happens if they won't answer your questions? Means it's not a lead. Means it's not going to work. That in and of itself, that is a qualifier. That is a way to qualify if it's going to fit or not. So your posture is one of info gathering, and that sets the tone for everything we're going to talk about in this video. You ask the questions. He who asks the questions controls the conversation. So when they ask you a question, you can, like we talked about in a previous video, repeat, affirm, and then pose a new question. You can say, that's a great question. I don't know. I'm just collecting the information for the investors that I send this information to. How long have you lived in the home? So you see how you turn it around, you transition it around. All right, so that is going to be our foundation. Your posture is as an info gatherer. Now, what information are you gathering? Great question. Now, below this video, by the way, I've got some additional resources for you. On this video, I will be holding this paper like kind of below the video. This is just kind of a quick cheat sheet on what needs to be covered. But I've got some great resources below this video as well to help you, including some live calls that you can listen to, so you can hear how we ask these questions. All right, so the first big question to ask, which in all cases you already know the answer to, that's going to be address. Because of the fact that you either went to the property in person and knocked on the door, or you called up as a for sale by owner, in almost all cases you'll have the address. That's the first big thing. You've already solved that problem. So you don't have to ask that. You already know what it is. The next one, which can be altogether very, very critical, is ownership. Ownership. Who owns the property? Now remember when we gave the example of door knocking a pre-foreclosure, we actually asked the question, are you Anna? As in whoever that person's name was, who owned the property. What if they said, no, I'm just a tenant? So we want to know who the owner of the property is, because we want to be talking to that person. Now, it could be more than one person, couldn't it? It could be a husband and a wife, couldn't it? It could be an ex-husband and an ex-wife, couldn't it? So one of the things that you're going to have to do if there are two owners, maybe it's a brother and a sister who just inherited a property, maybe it is a husband and a wife, ex-husband, ex-wife, you're going to have to talk to both of them. So this is how it can be asked. well, is it just you who owns this property, or do you own this property with someone else? And if they say, no, it's just me, you can say, well, okay, let me just ask a quick question. Are you married? Because sometimes that can play a role, and then your spouse would also be a half owner. And they'll say, well, yeah, I'm married, but I've owned this home a long time. Well, in most states, if someone is married, they automatically become a 50% owner in any real estate that they own personally. Okay, so you'll need to talk to both people and ask these same questions of both people. So if that other person's not there, you'll say, hey, is there any way I'll be able to get a chance to talk to the other owner? And if they say no, there's a qualifier right there. We haven't even gone through anything else, and we already know. If you can't talk to both owners, forget about it. Ignore it. Just say, look, then I can't help you. And they say, whoa, but I make all the decisions, and my brother, he doesn't make any of the decisions. He'll agree with whatever I say. That's when you can say, well, great. If that's the case, then I'm sure a quick call with him, he'll be able to verify that. Say, look, not my, and again, this goes back to posture. Look, not my fault, but the people that I gather this information for, they will not accept this information if I haven't talked to all the parties who own the property. Does that make sense? So you see where that posture comes in play? Really nice. You can blame it on those other people. That's why you have to talk to them. Okay, so you have to make sure you're talking to the owner or owners. I know that sounds simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Let's say you're in person, it's a pre-foreclosure, it's a moving sale, a estate sale. That's where you're going to ask the question. Are you the owner of the property, or is there somebody else who owns it? Or is there other owners of this property? Makes a huge difference, especially with estate sales, because they're going to have several different owners. And then in the case of an estate, you could ask, are you the executor of the estate? Executor of the estate. All right. Next. I put it as marketing, but what I'm really trying to ask here is this question. Is this property listed on the MLS with a real estate agent? Is this property on the MLS? Is this property listed with a real estate agent? If the answer is yes, this deal is done. Done. I know that sounds really cutthroat, but that's what you're doing here. You're finding good deals. And so what I'm doing here is I'm helping you filter out the losers. If it's already on the market, it's already listed, now it's not going to be a marketable deal. You're not going to be able to sell it. You won't be able to sell it to an agent or an investor. It's unmarketable because it's already listed, okay? So it needs to be a no here. You want a no. I'll put a check mark. Okay, so you want to be talking to the owner. We already have the address, and you need a no as far as if it's listed on the MLS. If the answer is yes, then you can just, end the conversation. Or, there is one slight thing you could do. You could say, well, would you have any interest in working directly with someone between you and that investor, and ignoring that agent or removing the agent from the deal? You could ask them if they'd be willing to remove. Okay, I'll make a note of that. Willing to remove. The reason why I'm not too keen on this is because even if they are willing to remove, they may not be able to. Real estate agent listing agreements are incredibly powerful. Breaking those things up is not easy. Okay, so what you want to hear is no. How are we doing so far? Pretty simple, right? Now again, this is a skill you're going to develop over time, how to talk to these people, ask the questions, and stay in control of the conversation. Next one. Now, if it's not vacant, you may find that out if you're door knocking. You may find out that it's vacant. Occupancy is the next one. Whether it's vacant or occupied is not a problem. It's just information you need to know. Okay? And so if it is occupied, then the next question is, who's occupying it? Is it a tenant? And if it is a tenant, when is their lease due? So if it's a tenant, then you just need to know a little bit more about that tenant and their situation. Okay? Pretty simple. Okay, so next we get into the property. Now, if you are there live at the property, you can discover this as you walk around. You can ask them their square footage, bedrooms and bathrooms. And again, I have some resources below this video that go into more detail on exactly what. But what you really want to know is square footage, bedrooms and bathrooms, when was it built, 1-story or 2-story, is it a brick, just whatever, as much data as you can get about the property. Sometimes these for sale by owners have all that information, like on a Craigslist listing or for sale by owner listing. If you're at the property, you can physically make the jot down the notes on the actual property. You see, all of a sudden, I'm not as critical about this. You're like, wow, Phil, you're so critical about these, but then all of a sudden you don't care about the property? Well, I do, but this is information that can be discovered even on the tax record in many cases. There's other ways to discover this data. And real estate investors, especially the professional ones, have access to the MLS too. So a lot of times we can get this data without ever asking the homeowner. But you can definitely ask it. If you're there in person, that can help just because it can give you a little bit more of a visual. Okay? All right, so this is where you're asking about the property. You know, one thing that's helpful to know is just the condition. You know, what needs to be done to the property. And what I'm going to do is below this video, I'll have a separate video that talks about how to evaluate what needs to be done. I'll walk you through a house so you can see that. So you can see what needs to be done to the property. And when you're there live, that can be helpful just to jot down those notes. Anytime you're trying to market a lead, it can be a lot more valuable if you've notated what needs to be done to the property. Okay? All right. Now, what we've done so far is asked very basic questions that nobody would have any issues answering. No one's going to have an issue answering who owns their property, or if it's on the MLS or not, or who lives there, or how many bedrooms and bathrooms. They're going to answer these questions. These are simple, these are non-abrasive, they're not very personal. But what you're doing here as you're heading down this road is you are creating a precedence that you ask the questions, they answer the questions, and slowly but surely, the more you ask, the more they answer, the more it builds a habit or a pattern, and so they're more likely to answer the more penetrating questions. Does that make sense? That's a key element here of why it's in the order it's in. Because over the course of this period of time, you're also simultaneously building a little bit of trust. They're answering more questions because the more you ask, in this experience of going back and forth is allowing you to get to a point where you can ask the big questions. All right? Big question is right here. Motivation. Now, we've talked about this in a previous video. Everybody appears to be motivated. What makes somebody motivated is asking a combination of questions. Number one, why are you selling? And then the bigger question, what happens if you don't sell? So they say, well, I'm selling because I'm losing my job. By the way, that's not a real answer. Okay, so you're losing your job. I know a lot of people lose their job, they don't sell their home. So you may have to ask, why are you selling 3 times to get to the real answer of why they're selling. But then the other and the more penetrating question of all is, what happens if you don't sell? So you may want to phrase this question of why selling. You may want to phrase it like this. You may want to say, if you're in person, hey, this looks like such a lovely home. Why would you ever consider selling? Or in the case of a foreclosure, you know what's going on. So you don't have to ask that. But you could ask, hey, what happens if you don't get this situation cleared up with the bank? What happens in 2 months? And have them say out of their own mouth, well, I guess it'll go to foreclosure. And then you ask, well, what happens then? And then have them say out of their own mouth, well, I guess if it goes to foreclosure, then I'll get kicked out of the house. And then, okay, well, what's going to happen then? Well, I guess we'll be homeless. Oh, okay. So now what you're doing is you're asking these critical questions to get them thinking. So motivation, why selling could be asked, hey, this is such a lovely home, why would you ever consider selling? Or, hey, it seems like a nice home, why would you ever consider selling? That's more like on a for sale by owner call. But yeah, if you have a moving sale or an estate sale or a pre-foreclosure, you already know why they're selling. So the next question is, what happens if they don't sell? So that is really the bigger question. What happens? They go to foreclosure? Do they just sit on it? Do they list it with an agent? Do they rent it out? What are they going to do? That is a critical piece of this whole thing. All this stuff is helpful. This is huge. It's everything. This is everything. Getting to the bottom of this. If they won't answer these questions, what did I tell you? It means that they probably aren't a good fit. So in other words, you got to get all the way down here. This is all part of this filtering process that's going on. Now, outside of the motivation, the last thing you want to learn about is the mortgage. You want to learn how much they owe, what their monthly payment is, are they behind? If they're pre-foreclosure, ask them if they know about how far behind they are. See if you can see any of these foreclosure documents, see if there's a foreclosure date set. All that sort of fun stuff. So any mortgage, who the mortgage company is, and everything. If they have a first and a second mortgage, anything about any loans. If they ain't got any loans on the property and is owned free and clear, there you go. Free and clear. Now, like I said before, we definitely have some more resources below here so you'll know exactly what to ask as far as the questions. And that little cheat sheet here has some good little answers to that as well. So this is what you're doing here in step 2. You're gathering this data. And then once you have all this data, then we'll go to step 3 is where you try to submit it to be monetized in some way. Like I said, if it's listed on the MLS, that deal's dead. If they won't answer the questions, they won't move forward, then that's probably not going to be a good fit either. I mean, you need people that, whether it's an agent or an investor, nobody wants to work with a seller that won't talk to them and explain their situation. So that's not going to be a fit either. So I hope this right here illustrates, although it may feel a little complicated in the beginning, you're going to realize just how simple this is. It's about asking good questions and then asking more questions and then just asking more questions. And when they ask you a question, you say, that's a great question, I have no idea. And then you go back to your questions. That makes sense? All right, fantastic. Well, again, the resources we have below this video, you're going to be able to listen to some calls, some PDFs that you can download as well, and really get this thing dialed in. It's going to take some practice, you know? You're not going to get it right away. But this is the difference maker. Because if you don't do step 2, anybody can do step 1. This is where the money's made. Going through this and really filtering out who the winners are. Because if you start trying to throw up a whole bunch of junk leads and try to monetize them, it's like the boy who cried wolf. Nobody's going to want to see your leads anymore because you throw up a bunch of junk. But when you throw up good stuff, all of a sudden it's very valuable and everybody wants to get your leads. Make sense? All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video on step 2 on how to qualify these things. It's something that it's an art form. You get better and better at it over time. I still do it today. I love it. I have it down to a science, and I really enjoy the process of going through, asking the right questions, and hearing what they say. And then I love it when you talk to one that's just really easy to talk to, and they have all their answers to your questions because you know they're going to be a winner. All right. Thanks so much for watching.